Live from America's heartland, this is the Daily Truth Report with your host, Noah Christopher.
Welcome back to the Daily Truth Report, and I have a very serious and sobering message to bring out today, but maybe one of hope and optimism for what we can do to turn this country around as well. Joining me today for the first time are two people I'm just getting to know, but two terrific Americans, and by all accounts, wonderful patriots and parents. Mark and Terry Stamen are joining me. Mark and Terry, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. I'll give a little bit of a background, and then I really want to hear your story in your own words. But Mark on the right there, Mark is a retired 20-year United States Air Force veteran from Cincinnati, Ohio. And Terry on the left has been a stay-at-home mom for 17 years, homeschooling their children. Mark and Terry have been married for 25 years. And that homeschooling their children part, boy, I bet the system just really doesn't like that, do they? And anytime you try and go off the grid, or you get out of the public school system, or don't want to submit to the vaccine schedule, or whatever else it is, the system tends to lash out. And that's what we're talking about today. I want to have you two tell it in your own words, but you have 7 beautiful children. I want to share my screen and put some of these pictures that you sent me up on the screen. Can you see those?
Yes.
Yes. So these are it says the Kentucky 7. You're from Kentucky. Are you from Kentucky?
I'm actually from Louisville, Kentucky. The situation we're going to talk about today happened in Louisville, Kentucky, Jefferson County.
Okay, great. So I want to cycle through. I got 3 of these pictures. I want to put them on. There's another one. Can you see that? Yes. And I'll put the third one up here. This is your pictures you sent me of your family. Look, I mean, just beautiful, all-American pictures. Everybody looks happy, healthy, great, very, very full and very busy, it looks like, but very happy and healthy. And but unfortunately, that's where the story takes a left turn. And I found it so troubling. I wanted to get you on the show and talk about it. So let me turn the share off and get you back on the screen so that. There we go. I don't know who wants to talk first, Mark or Terry, but tell us what happened and kind of walk us through. All of a sudden, you have a great family. Things are going well. You're homeschooling your children, maybe living in Kentucky, or I'm guessing a little bit off the grid, maybe. And all of a sudden, something suddenly goes wrong. Where did that start? And walk us through the beginning of this story. It started back in 2016. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Noah. And we were just your everyday American family, quietly going about our business. I was gainfully full-time employed. Terry was a full-time stay-at-home mom, doing an exceptional job managing our home with our 7 beautiful children, homeschooling. And homeschooling was something that we both agreed to in our marriage that we want to pursue. We registered with the state, followed all the laws that we were required to follow in respect to registering for homeschooling. And we were having a lot of successes with our lifestyle. Our children were schooled year round. They had a variety of activities that they were involved in. And aside from providing for my family through my employment, I was also faithful to my home responsibilities and tending to whatever needs there were at the home, and then going out and taking care of whatever things needed to be taken care of, and then spending time with our children. It was just a great way of life. We were happy. We had a fun-loving home, and we were building a strong family structure, something that we wanted to provide to our children that they could take with them into their adulthood, something that I had been accustomed to in my own life. And I recognize the importance and value of a strong knit family, and that's what we were providing for our children. So they were very engaged in the community. All of them were friends with neighbors and others in our community and library activities. And everything kind of changed in 2016 in February, when one day we were a little bit concerned while Terry was out driving with the children, and had a little bit of a concern regarding our 17-year-old daughter, Amy, not being able to possibly see something on the road as we were going along. So we were getting ready to prepare her for her driver's test, and we wanted to make sure that she was going to be good to go. And so we set up an appointment with a practitioner that we had never seen before on February 25th, 2016. and just to get an eye check that when Terry went with Amy, we thought, well, we'll just get this quick eye test and we'll just move right along to the next things that we need to take care of, because we had a very busy life. We had a lot going on. And we were still recovering from many moves that we had made during my time in service. And so, you know, we had gotten things pretty stable, and we were getting back into the, you know, the regular day to day. We were feeling really good about what we were doing. And so Terry and Amy went to this appointment with a practitioner we had never seen before. And as I just said, we went kind of evolved into a well check. And as with most adolescents, children sprout up really quick. And Amy had a body type like her mom and I, were tall and thin, and she had grown a lot in the ensuing or the preceding few months. And so this doctor began to question Amy in respect to her eating habits, and you know, she wanted to take blood from her and all of these other things. And we never thought anything of it. Like we had sit down dinners with our children every night that we could, and all of them were very well nourished. They were all well taken care of. Whenever they needed something, we would take care of it. And you know, so anyway, Amy didn't want to have the blood drawn, and so that did not happen. But it was very uncomfortable because it was these intrusive questions. You know, the eye test was done, and then eventually Terry and Amy left the visit. And when I had come home, we talked about it, and then, you know, it was like, wow, I couldn't really understand why it would kind of go that direction, but it did. And then within a few days, maybe a week or two, we began receiving these harassing phone calls from the doctor's office, insisting that we come back into the office because they had concerns with respect to Amy that she may be anorexic. And we knew that that was not the case, and we did not want to go back there, but we felt that with this weird insistence that we go back, that there just wasn't something right with that. And so we did not go back. And just for our own peace of mind, we eventually set up a second appointment, just giving me another assessment. We knew that she was fine, but that kind of occurred about a month later. But everything was fine. Amy was involved in various competitions, and we were getting her prepped for that. And she was very active, and just like all of our other 6 children. And so things really kind of took a turn for the worse when on March 25th of 2016, while I was at work, I got a call. I actually got tracked down by some personnel where I worked, and they said I had an emergency at home and I needed to go home right away. So I did. When I got home, Terry was pretty upset. She said, I'm getting these phone calls. They say they're from CPS, and they want me to call them. And I said, well, I said, until we can verify that, I said, just, you know, hang tight and wait till I get home. And when I got home, she was pretty upset, and but, you know, she was still going about her business with the kids. And
Hey, Mark, if I can jump in really quick, this is so CPS, Child Protective Services, for anybody who doesn't know that acronym. And I just have to throw this back up on the screen because there we go. These look like absolutely healthy, well-adjusted children to me. And
yeah, the child in question, Noah, at the time, is the one in the middle.
Right in the middle.
And she was 17 years old at the time of this occurred.
And meanwhile, let's see. Can you see that? That's the literal Secretary of Health under the Biden regime. This is what they want to tell you is healthy. A man dressed as a woman who is clearly obese. Meanwhile, your children, who look very happy, very healthy, are being you're now being contacted by CPS, Child Protective Services. So I wanted to jump in there. I had to throw those back up on the screen, but please keep telling the story, Mark. So you're contacted by CPS. You're figuring out how to respond.
Right. So kind of calmed things down when I got home, and then we lived fairly close to Terry's father, who had a live-in girlfriend that he had been with for quite a while. And so later that evening, we went down to their home for our normal Friday evening visit. And when we walked in, it was kind of a different atmosphere. As soon as we walked in, I got handed what looked to be a document as if from CPS that was handed to me from the girlfriend of Terry's father, which I thought was pretty strange. And I said, "What's this?" And I said, "I don't know what this is." And she said, "Well, it's from CPS and you need to call them." And, she got real belligerent, and things kind of, went downhill from there. And because of where this was going, we terminated the visit and we returned to our home. And, it was really perplexing as to why I would receive a document as if from CPS from someone who does not work in the government. But this woman did work in healthcare, in the healthcare industry. And so she did work with the doctor at the time as an operations manager in an office. And so anyway, the next day I got another document delivered to our door. This was on the 26th. And again, when I compared these two documents, I haven't served in the military and I worked with a lot of official documents. When I looked at these first two documents, they were highly suspicious as to their legitimacy. They didn't have the right people identified as to the positions on the heading of the paperwork, and they looked very shoddy and skewed. And so I had some questions about it, and but we both agreed that, well, we'll go find out if there really is something legitimate going on. And so we set up an appointment with the other practitioner on the 28th. That was a Monday. And Terry and Amy went down. They did the visit, did the will check with the practitioner, and her height and weight were significantly different than the first practitioner. She was heavier and shorter in stature, which put her in a very good zone from what the first practitioner reported. And so they wanted to take blood again, and we, Amy didn't want that to occur. And so that didn't happen. But regardless of that, there were no questions about Amy's eating habits. There were no questions about her height or weight or anything like that. In fact, the practitioner's exact words were healthy weight. That was something that Terry made a note of. And so we got a letter from the practitioner saying that she was in good health and under no restrictions. We felt really good about that, just in case, there would be anything else that would unfold that we may need something to show. And so then what happened was I went down to the CPS supervisor's office in the afternoon after Terry and Amy came home. And I took those two source documents down along with the good health letter that we received from the second practitioner. And when I went into the office, I met with the supervisor, and he said, "Oh yeah, we hand these out whenever we have a child welfare issue." And he said, "Will you submit to an interview?" I said, "Well," I said, we don't have a child welfare issue." I said, "and so I will not submit to an interview." And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" So we have a diagnosis that your daughter is severely anorexic and that without immediate treatment, she will die soon. And he kept pressing me for an interview, and I refused. And I said, "Well, I have a good health document here from a practitioner I just seen earlier in the day," and he wanted to take it off my hands, and I wouldn't let him. And so we went back and forth on this for a few minutes, and he said that he couldn't get it, even though I knew he could. And then, as it turned out, he admitted that he could, but he was just trying to see if I would comply with their little interview that they wanted to force upon me. And so I really had some questions in my mind because, there was no statement that was made that I am diagnosing your daughter with this condition from the first practitioner. And in fact, what we later discovered is that the nature of the allegation would have required not just a thorough physiological assessment to include withdrawing blood for a proper physiological assessment, but actually a mental health assessment, being that anorexia is a mental health condition according to the DSM-5, which they have to follow in respect to their procedures, which wasn't done. And so what happened is that meeting ended. I tried to get a copy of that from the records section, and yet standard bureaucracy couldn't get anybody to help me, so I wasn't able to get a copy of what the supervisor alleged that he had in his possession. He never showed me anything. He just pointed to a computer and said he had something electronically, apparently. And So I had nothing else other than what I went in there with. And then the next day, which I thought was pretty strange, this was on March 29th, we received another letter, as if from CPS, delivered to our door. And it said that if we don't take or call them or take Amy to get care, they're going to remove all 7 of our children on this document. And so, you know, anyway, it was just really weird because it was like, well, why, if I was just there the day before and I showed, you know, the good health document to the supervisor, why am I getting another document? This one looked just as bad as the first 2. And so later that night, I had to be out for some personal business, and Terry was home with the kids, and then I'll kind of let her speak as to what happened to her on the evening of March 29th.
Yeah, so a CPS worker and law enforcement came to our house in the dark of night. I think Amy was actually already went to go to bed, and they wanted me to let them in our home. I think that they had said that they wanted to question the children, and so this has been so many years ago, but I probably asked if they had a warrant. They didn't have a warrant, I guess, and I didn't allow them entry into our home.
You shouldn't have to.
Right, and I think the CPS worker made a statement along the lines of, if I didn't take Amy to the hospital that night, that she was going to come back and all of my children would be put in foster care, or something like that. And so anyway, they didn't break the door down. They left, and that was that for that night. And then was it the next day?
Yeah, so eventually I came home, and of course, you know, Terry had done a good job getting all the kids in bed like she normally does, and she was a little bit upset because, you know, having that kind of a trauma to have people, you know, show up in the dark of night, want to get into your house, and, you know, start questioning children and who knows what else. And so I was able to calm everything down, and then, you know, I had decided to take the week off from work because I kind of see there was some things that were unfolding that I felt like I needed to be home to take care of my family. And then on the next day, on March 30th, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we had 2 Louisville Metro Police Department officers come up to our door, and they come up and knock on the door, and the first words out of the officer's mouth was, "Mark, I need you to open the door. You lost custody of all 7 of your children." And
I'm sorry, with no court proceeding, no nothing, no due process. What? Nothing had happened at that point.
No paperwork.
No paperwork.
No paperwork.
Yeah, and
we lived very close to the courthouse.
Yeah, so I asked them, I said, "And why are you guys here?" And they would never say why they were there. They just wanted me to open the door and hand them all 7 of our children. And I said, well, I said, you guys are not going to get that. And I said, do you have a warrant? No, they didn't have a warrant. And I said, do you have any paperwork? They didn't have any paperwork. They had like no order from a court. Eventually they acknowledged that, well, they had a verbal order from a judge, which we later found out that under state law, children are not, or maybe it was the court rules, children are not to be removed on a verbal order. And so at that time, we didn't know that, but I knew enough about due process that they don't have any documentation that, you know, that they really shouldn't even be there. And really, the officer made it clear. He said, you know, I think his words were, you know, you haven't committed a crime, you're not going to jail. So I'm thinking, well, then why are you guys even here? Because, you know, it makes absolutely no sense. And I said, well, I guess why you guys are here is something to do with my daughter, Amy. I said, so I just want you to know that all the children are fine here. We had all the blinds open in our home.
Can I just make a statement here?
Yeah,
No, if it's okay, I just would like to interject here for your audience to focus on that point about you haven't committed a crime, you're not going to jail. Give us all 7 of your children.
Oh, this is so evil. I don't even know how to process this. It's unconstitutional. It's against every right that we should have as Americans, but they hate the family. They have always known they need to destroy the family, and they were literally doing that here. It's beyond the pale.
And this is what this system does. This is happening to many families. And what happens with the CPS system is it's not a criminal proceeding that they put you through. It's a civil proceeding. Family court that they take you into is not a criminal proceeding.
Even though child abuse and neglect is a criminal statute in the state of Kentucky and just about every other state in our country, they, in most cases, and such was the case with us, they did not proceed against parents.
So I just wanted to make that point for your audience that's listening, because I don't know if a lot of people realize that they are taking people's children without charging them with a crime. And also another facet to our story is if people look up Louisville Metro Police Department, the ones that were there telling us to give them our children around this same time, they ended up being under their Explorer program, which is a program through the Boy Scouts for law enforcement, ended up being under investigation, and some of the officers ended up being convicted. There was issues with sexual abuse within this program. And so this is the law enforcement agency that's telling us to give them all 7 of our children, not charging us with the crime, no paperwork, and we're just supposed to hand our children over to them.
So as the story unfolded from there, Noah, what happened was we went round and round with these guys for like 2 hours. So, and they kept coming back to the door. They called for additional officers, and so the police scene grew from like initially 2 or 3, and then there was a social worker. It just kept growing, and I would not open the door without them having paperwork or a warrant. I think maybe Terry mentioned a few minutes ago, we lived probably only about maybe 20 minutes away from the courthouse, maybe less. If you had your siren and your lights on, you could have gone down if you had forgotten paperwork and you really had a legitimate emergency. But none of that was attempted in the whole 2 hours. They just kept wanting us to open the door, and then they wanted me to just talk to the social worker, which I refused to do. I said, I don't have to talk to you, and I just said, please, just leave.
So I called 911. We got an attorney on the phone with them. I called the news media. The news media showed up, and after about 2 hours, they left.
Yeah.
They didn't break the door down to get Amy, who was supposedly, according to them, in immediate danger of dying. They just left.
Yeah. And it was really kind of strange because the scene grew so large that we had probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 police cars, and it was a very intimidating scene. And of course, there was just a lot of pressure there, and we did not cave to it. We're like, no, you're not going to come in here you're not going to do this, basically. And so when Terry called 911, because something didn't look right, again, a few more came out, and they kept pressing us to come out and talk to them, which we refused. And then they had threatened to go get a warrant, and of course,
you told them about the good health document.
Yeah, I had showed the officers the good health document, and I said, you can call over there if you guys have any questions, where our practitioner was. And so after that, and then we got an attorney on the phone. Eventually they left, and no one came back the rest of that night.
Well, tremendous courage by both of you to stand up to that. That's the type of thing, and I guess you said you called 911, but the police are there doing the harassment. When you call, I don't know who else to call. You call 911. Eventually, you get an attorney involved, which that I assume was helpful. What did the attorney do? Is that how you got them eventually all to leave? How do you disband this scene?
Well, of course, he right up front started talking about how much money he was going to want to represent us going forward, and of course, we were not very comfortable with that. But he did say that he would talk to the officers, and I don't really know if he really did or not. But after they left,
so we don't really know why they decided to. They were there for about 2 hours. It could have been a combination of the attorney and the local news coming out.
Yeah, well, I do remember one thing that they said was, we're going to go ahead and rescind the order. And I said, what do you mean rescind the order? You guys never even provided an order to rescind one. And so when I talked to the attorney on the phone afterwards, he said, I said, look, they talked about a recession of something. And I said, I want to have authentication of that. He said, oh, yeah, it's coming across the fax lines now. I'll get it right over to you or whatever. And so I'm waiting the rest of the night. Nothing happened. It wasn't like, come down and get it or anything. But the next day around 9 o'clock, this was on the 31st, we had the same 2 Louisville Metro police officers come to our door. But before that, I got a call from that attorney, and he wanted me to come down to his office to pick up the document, according to him. And of course, I refused because I wasn't feeling good about any of the things that happened up to this point. So I was thinking, well, that could be some kind of an entrapment, and I was going to put myself in that situation. If they have legitimate court process, they can serve it in the course of procedure. So about a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes or so, they did come by. The same two officers who initially came by brought the document, and it looked like a Microsoft Word generated product, quickly typed up, and had some sort of a weird signature on it. And they stuck it in the door, and I grabbed it, looked at it, and nothing else happened. It wasn't like, they came back to say, hey, we really need to secure the safety of your daughter or anything like that. So another day passed. And then on later that evening, we received our first set of summons that looked just as shoddy and illegitimate as all the other paperwork we'd received up to that point. Someone came to our door in the middle of a wind and rainstorm, and they left some documents in the door that got a little bit wet, but there was no official signature, and it said that there was, that there should have been a petition attached, and according to what we later found out was state law that they have to serve these documents in association with other documents. It was just the summons documents, one for Terry, one for me, so we had a total of 14, one for each of our children. And so took a look at it, and they wanted us to go to the court on April 1st, and which was the next day, and which was really kind of strange. And so when the time came, it was really strange because in the afternoon, we were supposed to go down, and we had some issues with the car, and I had issues with the identification of my children on some of the paperwork that was seen up to this point, that it wasn't legitimate. So we had made some calls and weren't able to get a hold of anybody. I had typed up a letter asking for, and we later called 911 to see if I could get a local Metro police officer to take this document down to the courthouse to ask some questions as to the legitimacy of any of this and the problem with the names of some of our children. And so as it unfolded from there, because we had those questions, and then we had a vehicle that the girlfriend of Terry's father actually sold us due to our other vehicle or van that we had got totaled in an accident. And we had well, all of a sudden we couldn't start the car. And so we had no form of transportation in addition to the questions. And so when the time came to go, the time came and went, and we still were at home. And so later that afternoon, we were thinking, well, I guess, if this was legitimate, well, they're going to come and they're going to arrest us. And I guess that's, what they'll do from that point. Well, none of that happened. Later in the afternoon, after the 1 o'clock time frame, probably, I don't know, sometime between 2 and 3 o'clock, probably, I don't know for sure, so don't hold me to that time frame, but it was sometime after the 1 o'clock appointment. Then we had a Louisville Metro police officer come by the house, and he knocked on the door, and he said, I don't know what's going on here. He said, I was just dispatched to do a well check. And we told him, yeah, the children are fine, we're fine, there are no problems here. And he said, okay, and he left. So again, no attempt, like Amy's in imminent danger, like we were told up at this point. No attempt to secure her safety. And so they came and left. And then around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we had another visit, this time from the CPS supervisor that I had seen on March 28th, along with one of Terry's other relatives, one of her aunts. And he brought a bunch of court documents by, and he left them in the door. And really the weird thing about it was there were no police officers. And so I'm thinking, why is this guy leaving all of it? There was like affidavits, emergency custody order, and with custody already established to go to the girlfriend of Terry's father and to her father. I said, look, I don't know what this is, so you can leave it in the door. He did, and we started taking a look at it. And in the paperwork, it had a bench warrant for me for $5,000, but nothing for Terry. And so I began having a lot of questions about this. And so nothing else happened that night. And then the next day, I decided to go have these documents looked at, because these were just horribly compiled documents. And we even had questions as to whether or not the name of the CPS supervisor that he was signing off as the deputy clerk for the court with his initials. It looked very, very much like what his writing was on the business card he gave me on March 28th. And so I went to go meet with the Jefferson County Sheriff at the church that we were married in many years before, and met initially with 3 of them, and 2 of them got up and walked off, and I was left with 1. And I was sharing with him basically the story, the timeline and everything what happened up to this point. And he began looking at the documents and said, I don't think any of this is legitimate. And I said, I would just like to have someone begin an investigation into it and take a look at it. So when I mentioned that I had a bench warrant out for me, he wanted to see my ID, and he left the room. And I had another church observer there, or someone from the church, and who was taking all this in addition. And I'm thinking, well, I guess he's going to go see if there's something on me. And then he was gone for a few minutes. When he came back, he handed me my ID back. No attempt like you're under arrest or anything like that. And he said, well, we recommend that you just see if you're on the court docket. And so so they had they had given us another set of documents and another set of summons for another court hearing a few days later. And so in this whole interim period, though, what happened is there was no attempt by any other officers or any CPS people to come by and to try to secure the alleged need for Amy's imminent danger of dying and alleged severe anorexia that they claimed she had on illegitimate diagnosis, like I said before, which had no supporting evidence to it. Nothing was done along those lines. And so on the advice of some, we talked to another individual who had been a lawyer, and he was going to work with us to try to get with a lawyer, and just sharing the story. In other words, where this has holes. And he said he connected us with this gentleman who agreed to represent both of us, and we had a court appointment for in another docket, the emergency docket at Jefferson County. The first time it was in the 5th division. This one was in the 9th division with a different judge from what the other paperwork was saying. And so when I met with this guy and this attorney, I told him all this stuff. He said, well, just give me the good health document and I'll just take it down there. And he said, it should be good, shouldn't be a problem. And then then it kind of unfolded to, well, no, then you need to come. And then no, you and Amy come. And then, so when the time came, after meeting with him and we were talking through all of this, I go home, and this was on April the 6th. And Amy was jumping around playing with her sister on the trampoline in our backyard. And we had to interrupt all of the daily activities of the day to take her down with me down to the court. When we went in there, no one made any attempt to take Amy directly to the hospital or anything like that. They did begin questioning her, which I was very uncomfortable with, and took her aside without any representation, and to be basically interrogated by the guardian ad litem. They asked her a lot of questions that I could tell after she was done was a little bit upset about. And then eventually, when the proceedings commenced, we went to the courtroom, and basically they just had their little say, and then we presented the good health document. I'm thinking, worst case scenario, I'm just going to be told get a third party assessment, because there were apparently 2 conflicting things, at least from what they were presenting. And they accused me of forging the good health document. I'm thinking all they got to do is just call the medical practitioner. And so none of that was done. And so they rejected the good health document that we had from our second provider. And then they moved against me, and they said, well, we need to detain Mark until we get the other 6 children. And they called Terry at home on the phone, and what happened was I'm sitting there in the court watching this, and the judge says, I'm Judge so-and-so, and I'm ordering you to release the other 6 children. And Terry said, no one's going to take my children from me, and hangs up the phone. Well, that didn't sit too well with the attorney I was with, and he eventually later refused to continue representing Terry. And then what happened after that was they moved against me and said, well, we need to detain him. And so without charging me with a crime, There wasn't any of this, like, you're under arrest for the crime of ... It was just like, they just took me away behind the other door, and they booked me, put me through the whole booking process. And I was there for several hours before I began asking questions. Got put in solitary confinement because I did ask the question as to why I was still there. And all this time, they had told two people in the courtroom before they arrested me. One was the girlfriend of Terry's father, and one was her aunt that we had mentioned a few minutes ago. And they ordered Amy to be taken directly to the hospital. Now, under state law, whenever they're involuntarily committed, they should be transported with state officials of the same gender, from what we have discovered according to state law. And so that didn't happen. And then what happened was we later found out that, or I later found out from Terry that they didn't take Amy directly to the hospital. They took her back to our house, and they began moving her things out of her house down to the girlfriend's of Terry's father. And they made about 3 or 4 trips. I think it was 4 trips. And during this time, we had the social worker come by and, basically lecture Terry. So whenever a doctor tells you have to do something, you have to do it. And, so they're already beginning to, create more stress. And Terry's wondering, like, well, what happened to me? And she later finds out that I am in jail. And when I asked the question, they said, well, you're here on a charge of contempt. You're here until your next hearing. And then which was a week away. And then when I checked with another group a few hours later, they said, well, there's $35,000 cash bailout on you. And it was just all really weird. And, for child abuse and neglect or something like that, even though there was no charge of a crime. And so after about 20 to 22 hours of this, eventually I was released. There were a lot of things that Terry was doing on the outside, and I went to my attorney's office after I got released. And he wrote a letter, and in the letter it said, I had not been charged with a crime. And so I didn't understand really what any of that was about, because from what I later found out from Terry was that when they came by with additional Louisville Metro police officers, they eventually did take the children. And yet they still held me, even though from what they said, they were just like, immediately let me go, but they were just holding me and then coming, the things that Terry was seeing happen on the outside when she was looking in to the system, there were things that were just changing, and it was just really weird. And so then we began the process of trying to reclaim our children. At some point, they did take Amy to the hospital later that night. But not like there was any sense of an emergency or any urgency. And she was held there against her will with very strict scrutiny. She was basically monitored with everything she did. She wasn't allowed to go outside, even though she really liked to go outside every day. And so it basically was 10 days or so of torture. And then after that, she was not diagnosed with anorexia, which we knew that she wasn't, that there was never one to begin with. And so, yeah, so pursuant to the events of April the 6th, NOAA, they stripped us of educational and medical decision-making for our children. And as it unfolded from there, we began the process of immediately trying to reclaim them. And then we began our investigation, and we began involving some of our government officials, like our representative or our senator. And we were standing on the securities and protections of our constitutional rights, that none of this was legitimate. But later found out that they didn't follow the state process they were required to follow on the allegation of anorexia. It would have required a very strict adherence to Chapter 645. There's a whole set of procedures that they have to follow in respect to involuntary hospitalization of a child, the involvement of the parents in the care of that child, probably the preventing of the taking of the other 6 children, being that it was an alleged mental health condition that wasn't really even legitimate to begin with. And so they didn't follow that, which is a crime. And every motion that we made along the way was denied on our constitutional rights, on our protections. And every other motion we made in respect to the lack of due process and motions for dismissal were all denied. And
Mark, have you had other attorneys? It sounds like the one you had early on did stopped representing you. Did others come into the process along the way at these steps that you're describing right now? Were they helping you with this process, or were you doing all of this on your own?
yeah, that's a great question, Noah, and I appreciate you asking it. Here's the answer to it. Because that first attorney we had, he didn't like it that Terry hung up the phone on the judge when she was ordering her to give them our other kids. Eventually, they split us in the courtroom when we were going there trying to, stand on our rights and say, give us back our kids. You have no legitimacy for doing this. And so there's never any charge of a crime, but they were calling it a civil proceeding. And so they split us, and Terry got another public defender, and I had the original one I had. And it was always this back and forth. So there began this separation. We didn't like that. And so eventually, because neither one of those two would file any of the motions that we were asking them to file, lecturing us about how we just need to do what they tell us, and we should just comply and do what they tell us. And we wouldn't, because we felt that was a violation of the protections of our rights, specifically the 13th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, which says we are not to be subject to involuntary servitude unless we've been convicted of a crime. And the state of Kentucky also has a similar thing in their state constitution. And so all of that was disregarded. And then eventually we got rid of those two attorneys, and we decided to go pro se and began filing our own motions.
Yeah, thank you. So advance the story a little bit. So at some point, all of the children have been taken from you. You're working through these motions, trying to work through the court system, thinking surely my constitutional rights would protect and override a lot of this, and it's not happening. From that moment till today, have you made any progress? Have they all still separated from, all 7 kids are still separated from you?
Yeah, so that's how our children were taken, and I'm going to get to the high points and as we roll this through the end. But I want to make note that the woman who we feel was the mastermind of a conspiracy to kidnap our kids, and that's what happened based on our investigation. But she had a brother on the Louisville Metro Police Department at the time with all of their other problems that they had in respect to child welfare and child abuse, real child abuse. Anyway, she had a twin brother on the Louisville Metro Police Department that we feel may have been involved in this scheme to kidnap our kids. And as the process unfolded from there, we eventually went pro se, and every motion we were filing, they disregarded it. So because we would not comply with services that they wanted to force upon us and sign on a case plan, they gave permanent custody of our children to the girlfriend of Terry's father and to her father. And then they were supposed to keep all 7 of them together. But what happened was they eventually split them in violation of the court order between those two and Terry's aunt, who was involved in this also. And so they gave them permanent custody, and we have been fighting every step of the way. And what we later discovered in the course of our investigation was we began to gather evidence based on our first look and looking at these documents. From my initial questioning as to their legitimacy and possible forgery and their shoddiness, to actually confirming that. And the way we confirmed it was we began to see similar near exact images across the CPS documents that we received, the documents that the CPS supervisor, his name was Roy Hardy, dropped off on our door on April 1st. And then we began to compare these, and we began to see these near exact images showing up. And so we were able to retrieve some source documentation from the girlfriend of Terry's father. And I basically scanned everything I could get, extracted them, PowerPointed them all, sorted them all out, A through Z, 0 through 9, on every court document, CPS document, even police documents that we later were able to retrieve out of the court file at 25 cents a copy. And in August of 2016, they began taking child support out of my military pension and subjecting Terry to the same, which is now totaled up to about $45,000 for me to the current day. And we discovered the obvious conspiracy and the people who were involved, and we know who's involved and who planned this out, and that there are judges, healthcare practitioners, there are attorneys, and medical practitioners and private citizens who were involved in this. We discovered on the evidence that this may have been a long-running thing with the source documentation that we had going back to 2013 and 2005. And so I came up with over 1,100 of these images, and we began the process of going through every law enforcement agency available to us in our quest for justice and the immediate return of our children. And yet we have been denied and turned away and ignored all of our crime evidence, thousands of pages of evidence, and we've gone to the highest levels of the Department of Justice, and yet the whole system has failed us, and we are still without our children to the current day. And because the system has failed us, and we have irrefutable, concrete, hard evidence of people committing crimes, we later found out that this operation that's been going on, they've also been making color of law statutes to immunize themselves. And this is a very key point to all this. They immunize themselves against civil or criminal liability in respect to any child welfare action. What we later found out is these same immunity laws are also showing up in all 50 states in respect to child welfare action, but also in other areas. And so in going to the highest levels of the Department of Justice, we discovered in our investigation that we have a federal law. It's 42 U.S. Code, Chapter 21, Section 1981, which is a statement of equal rights, and it establishes that all persons subject to the jurisdiction of the United States that are subject to like penalties, pains, punishments, and that they can't be sued, which basically eliminates the immunity laws. And it states very clearly in paragraph C of that statute that it protects against impairment by the color of state law. And so we know that we have the evidence for justice, but we've been denied justice, and we're now being denied a right that statute, that 1981 federal law establishes it as a right to sue and have criminal justice. And it's also protected by the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment says we're to have the equal protection of the laws. And so all of these things really point to deprivations of our rights under the color of law, which is also a criminal offense at the federal level under 18 U.S. Code, Chapter 13, Sections 241 and especially 242. And so what they've been doing is that they have been basically committing acts of sedition in this process and to the theft of our children and our Title IV money. Because for your audience who may not know, and this is very important as to what's driving this, is there are large amounts of Title IV money, our Social Security money, that flow out to the state agencies under the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997. Bill and Hillary Clinton were involved in enacting it along with members of the 105th Congress. Basically what it did was it incentivized the CPS agencies across all 50 states with large amounts of our Title IV Social Security money. So we're funding this. And this is a fraud op happening across the United States through the destruction of many families. They're not being given due process. Someone is just making an allegation, walking off with their kids, and they're being placed in predominantly foster care. And the reason for that is because there's very little to no money that goes out to the states under relative placement. And so in our case in Kentucky, we found that Kentucky was #1 at the time with around 97% of all children in out-of-home placements were not with relatives, meaning they were either in an institution with non-relative foster care providers, strangers basically. And because of that large money, this is why many people may not know it, but if you pay attention, you're going to hear a commercial on your radio, see one on your TV, or you're going to see a sign in your community saying that we need more foster parents. And it isn't because there's a lot of bad parents in the United States who are charged or convicted of a crime and there's no relatives. It's because it's a scheme to steal our money and then eventually to traffic the children, because many child traffickers, child sex abusers are getting a hold of children in this way. And we think that, you know, just the complicity or the lack of action that we have many people within our system who are involved in it. And on the evidence that we possess, we know who's involved. And so we're out here now in the public arena to warn Americans what's going on, because the destructive impact on this is just horrible. It'll destroy your livelihood, as it has. It's severely, it struck us down severely. And without the help of some good Americans up to this point, we probably wouldn't even be here doing this today. But by the grace of God and those good people, and we know there are many others out there, we're going to fight this fight. We're going to keep speaking the truth. We have the evidence. We're going to disclose it. We're going to continue to show the people what's happening. And to stop the fraud op, because our children are suffering. And Terry knows a lot about the suffering that children go through. So before we close this out, I want to give her an opportunity and then turn it back over to you just to talk about the impact that it has on many of the children.
So Noah, for your audience that's maybe curious, 3 of our children are now over 18, and we have reconnected with them. The relationship with a couple of them is very strained, and 4 of our children are still being held, continue to fight to be reunited with them. And throughout this process, we've met a lot of families that have been subjected to this system. There's many children that are being harmed through this process and the trauma that it causes to both the children and the families. It's unlawful, it's inhumane, and we just want to help other families that are going through this, and we want to continue to work to expose it, to make more people aware of what's happening so that we can put an end to it, to protect the children and their families that it's happening to. They can, if you don't want to give your child a vaccine, a shot, if you don't want to acknowledge your child's desire to change their gender, you know, these are things that they can use against parents and claim medical neglect, emotional neglect, and use that to remove your children from you. And you know, we just want people to be made aware of what's happening and to help us with the exposure, and to not think that if this comes to your door that you're going to be able to do anything to stop them.
That's Terry. That's where it gets very scary. What you just said. You can see the writing on the wall. If you don't want to have your child vaccinated, if you don't want to put that poison in their systems, if they're told at school that they're a different gender and they come home and you tell them the biblical truth of what their gender is, and you don't want to support that kind of nonsense, the system is being set up to separate them, and it all goes back to trying to destroy the family. And like Mark said, follow the money. And this is a system. The money is being incentivized. And sadly, your story is not unique. I have heard this story from other people, and I want to put out a call. Anybody listening to this that's had a similar story, maybe in a different state, somewhere in America, if this is your story as well, go ahead and contact us, and we might do some more of these interviews, because this is sadly not. It would be bad enough if this was the only case out there and you were dealing with this, but this is a story I've heard from several different people, and we need to get the word out. We need to shine light on this and make sure that this doesn't happen to more people, because it sure looks like the system's being set up to accelerate this, and I don't want other people to have the same story that you two are having.
Yeah, no, it's a widespread problem, and so many people in your audience maybe they will think this, maybe they won't, but think, well, this is just a terrible story. It's an isolated thing. No, it's not. It's happening like a script across all 50 states. To many, many, many. I mean, pick a number. I mean, millions have been affected by this over many years. But the threat is that when they get a hold of the children, and there's an exception where maybe the children will be reunified. They state that's the goal, but that is the exception and not the norm. What they really are doing is they're moving children away from their loving parents, and they're placing them with strangers. And the threat is they have to take more children every year in order to receive an annual adoption bonus. And so as you get more children into the system, you get them out into the foster care placements, and then you get them eventually adopted out where they got to go on the other end to get more children. And so just because it may not have happened to you or someone you know, the threat is out there. It's happening in your neighborhood. It might even be happening on your street. And they they do not discriminate. It doesn't matter what your worldview is. You know, there are some who do have worldviews who do target others because they may have a different, you know, a different worldview or perspective on things, just as a weapon. So we've seen that. We think that's what happened in our case because we chose to homeschool our children. And after our daughter and her other 6 were taken, and they were placed in one of the worst public school systems, our daughter became a governor's scholar in the state of Kentucky within just a few months after she was removed from our home. So that was all the result of our investment in her and she's been very successful in her studies. And it just runs contrary to what the additional allegation was, that because we homeschooled and they didn't know what grade they were in, that we were educationally neglecting them. They said we didn't register with the state, even though we did have proof that we registered with the state based on feedback mail that we had received from them acknowledging that. And so basically they just falsify, fabricate evidence. And in our case, we know that the woman, on the evidence, and it's an irrefutable amount of evidence that points to at least the one, at least to her, and probably to maybe even some others. But when you can show the corroboration or even near exact images that look like they were scanned themselves, and this has been going on for several years, and being that the Jefferson County Family Court system is a self-acclaimed national model, that what we uncovered there, we feel is happening in very like manner across all 50 states. And so we asked for a case of national interest because of what we were finding out happening to many other families, and how what was happening to their children and the abuses that were happening to them. And like I said, we were ignored all along the way, and with all the corruption that we were seeing in different levels of the Department of Justice, we went back to our representatives, and they gave us lip service. We eventually met with our senator, one of our senators, Rand Paul, with his deputies, and we even had a meeting with people from 5 states, and that we wanted an inquiry into the failures of the Department of Justice and the justice system. Yet eventually, even with all of our evidence, they did nothing and stopped talking to us. So we have no representation. We don't have a system of justice, and we have no one listening to us. And we have nowhere else to go but to the American people. And what we're aiming to do, in addition to presenting to the American people the defrauding of their money, because that's what's happening. We're having our children stolen, our money stolen, our freedom stolen, our way of life stolen, and it's a threat for every American with children. And even if you're not a man or woman who has children, they're doing the same thing in adult protective services, where they're just making an allegation. They come in and declare someone mentally not well, and they will confiscate assets. And that's a whole other thing, but very similar in its operation. And so when we see these elements combined with so many of the other elements, we have a seditious operation happening. People talk about corruption, but if you go look up seditious conspiracy in your favorite internet search engine in respect to 18 U.S. Code Chapter 115, Section 2384, I think it is, it'll show you right there that basically being denied the protections of our laws is an act of sedition. And that's exactly what's happening. We're being denied the protections of our right to justice and civil remedy, and many other Americans are going through this under that 42 U.S. Code, Chapter 21, Section 1981. I encourage everyone to look it up, or you can visit our website. We have 2 organizations, and you can find out more there. I don't know if we have time to talk about this, but if you'd like to talk a little bit about it, I'll let Terry talk about Let Our Children Go, and then we can talk maybe about the Heritage and Freedom Coalition.
Yeah, that's great. I do want to wrap this up, but before we do, I want to tell people where they can find you. I want you both. You have 2 different organizations. I think you each kind of work on separately, and I want to tell people where they can find you. So on the screen behind you, it's been up on the entire interview, letourchildrengo.org. They can go there. They can find you there. Your email address looks like letourchildrengo@protonmail.com. 2 spots where they can find you. Tell us briefly about the 2 organizations, Let Our Children Go, and then also the Heritage and Freedom Coalition. Tell us what you're doing on each of those, and then tell us if people have listened to this, and if they're experiencing this themselves, how do they get in touch with you? What do they do? Or if it's just a concerned citizen, someone that's hearing this and is not affected but wants to help out, what can people do if they want to jump in and do something? Because there's so many bad things going on right now, and then just to know that this is happening beneath the scenes, beneath the surface, out of the limelight is really, really terrifying. So go ahead, tell us about those 2 organizations and what can people do if they want to get involved.
Yeah, thanks, Noah. It is a big threat because of the whole mandated reporter issue. You can have a doctor or a teacher, or just an anonymous allegation made against you, and these people are brought into your life. There's a contact form on our page that people can reach us through letourchildrengo.org, or they can just email us directly at that email address that you gave out. People that are we're trying to build a huge network of people that are affected by this system, advocates, attorneys that are willing to help and speak out. People can find us on social sites. Just do a search for Let Our Children Go. We share a lot of information there that you can gather to help if you want to help advocate for exposure for this. There's a lot of information coming out from the mainstream news as far as the danger that the foster care system is. So one of the ways that if people want to help is just by sharing the information, and you can get that from visiting our social sites. And then also, if anybody wants to help more directly, please do use the contact form or email us. We're hoping to eventually maybe have local chapters, and also any families that are going through this, that have been through it. If you're a child that is now an adult and went through the foster care system, or an adoptee that was taken from your family, we help with support to the families the best that we can for right now. I mean, we're trying to get more attention on the issue and hopefully get justice for families that this is happening to. And we would really like anybody that wants to join with us in that effort to please reach out to us and chat with you and go from there.
Yeah, so we have a vision for both organizations. Like Terry said, you can find out more by visiting those sites that you mentioned, Noah. And just a little bit about what I do with the Heritage and Freedom Coalition is that when I saw what was going on and being a veteran, having taken out oath to support and defend the Constitution, with a focus on the importance of the American family and children with their parents who are not being basically charged with a crime or convicted of one, that this is a heinous assault against our country and our way of life, to the destruction of our family. Eventually, if we don't stop it, our country is going to be irreparably harmed, and we need to do something now. And so, any constitutional or freedom-based issue, that's what the Heritage and Freedom Coalition is about. Is that we want to join together across the entire spectrum. I don't care what your worldview is or what your political persuasion is. If you love your freedom and you love our way of life and the Constitution that secures our rights, our freedom, that's what the Heritage and Freedom Coalition are about. And the coalition part of it is extremely important because people who are going through this and many other things, you may go to your representative by yourself, maybe with a small group of people, and they act like they want to listen to you, but in the end, they don't do anything for you, and they brush you off. So we documented everything that we went, everywhere we went, everything that we did. And we have all the evidence, and we're going to continue disclosing it. But here's the important part. Information is one thing, and dissemination is a good thing. But if we don't act on it, it means nothing. So the whole point of the coalition is that we can build local chapters, along with Let Our Children Go, to help and support families to rescue and recover their children. And in growing our numbers across the country, that we will show up and build those healthy relationships toward demanding that our system of government, those people who are in it, who are right now working against us, that they will listen to us en masse. We're tired of being ignored. We're tired of watching our children being harmed. We see the threat to our country, and it's on us. What will be our legacy to our children who survive and look back on us? Will we be regarded as a great generation, or will we be regarded as a bunch of do-nothings to continued harm and maybe even eventual demise of our country? And so we want to get the numbers together and build the trust of people. Try to get together with 4 people in your neighborhood at your local restaurant or a coffee shop or a park and talk about what's going on, and then connect with us. And that we will get the people together and go and demand that they uphold our Constitution that protects us, that they will uphold due process of law and pursuant laws to our Constitution, and that we will stop this travesty unfolding across our land. So that's a little bit about our focus of our mission, and that's what we're doing. We're doing local action right now, and as well as working with people across the country, but we need a lot more people to step up and get involved. So no, I really appreciate you giving us the extended time today to speak so freely about what happened to us. But like I said, we're out here on not just for ourselves, but on behalf of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of hurting children and families and then to inform people who don't know what's really going on that they may be being used by dark forces to facilitate this scheme. And so, one question, if people want to be a foster care provider, I mean, we are not anti-foster care, but it should be such an exceptional thing when you have relatives begging to be care providers. When there is no crime, it shouldn't even be happening. And that's why I call it a fraud op, because it's basically deprivation of an honest service. We haven't contracted with government for the oversight of our children. And so we need the correct course, but we need our fellow good Americans out there to not just be informed, to step up and reach out to us. Now, we do get emails and we do get contacts, and because it's just the two of us and maybe a handful of a few others right now, we need those helpers, but we will get back to you. And so even if you're going through this, just take heart that we will not leave you ignored. We will not let you down. We will be there for you. So follow us on the websites. And Noah, we really appreciate you because and wanting to do your part, maybe highlighting other stories, because there are some really, really bad ones out there. We know many of them. And so to continue to highlight this would be just an awesome thing. So thank you so much for your the great time you allowed us today. We really appreciate it.
Our guests today have been Mark and Terry Stamen, and I want to thank you so much for your time in coming on. We'll put all of your links down below this video. If anybody is experiencing this or just wants to jump in and help, go ahead and get in touch with them at Let Our Children Go and the Heritage and Freedom Coalition. And if anybody has a similar story and wants to come on and tell it, get in touch with me. This is unfortunately a story that is not unique to Mark and Terry, and the best I can do here is to shine a light on it and to get people talking about it and get more people involved. So Mark and Terry, thank you for coming on. Thank you for the good fight that you're waging. We're sorry that you've had to deal with this. Absolutely terrible. No parent should ever have to deal with this, but you're obviously very brave and you're not backing down, and we sure hope you continue to make a big effort. So thank you for coming on, and we'll keep telling your story.
Thank you, sir.